Addiction is a person, place, thing, and here's a scary one, or a thought that becomes my source. Okay? And so when I'm looking at that, it becomes my source. For example, money. If money becomes my source, I become unmanageable. I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father and all that because that's all I'm chasing is this, and I can never get enough. Same thing with heroin and gambling, pornography, shopping, service work. I mean, I see a lot of people that are addicted to helping others and staying busy. They don't sit down because they're scared to sit down to look at themselves. I was that way, So that's what, the real thing of addiction is. So with that said, we're all addicts. Everybody's an addict.
Shit's about to go down. I'm feeling something in my spirit.
Chats and Tatts with Aaron Della Vadova.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Chats and Tatts with me, your host, Aaron Della Vadova. I think a lot of you that have been really closely following the show have noticed a theme, a few themes, really. Sometimes it's about creatives and artists, obviously, and other times there's some very, very powerful spiritual figures we've had on the show, and of course, some extreme athletes. But I think the fourth type of person I'm really, really drawn to is stories of recovery. And I don't mean that directly to addiction, although that will be a part of this episode. I mean just recovery from life. Life can be hard. It can be really hard. And some people take a beating more than others. And that beating they take, and I don't mean physical beating, I just mean life. Can knock you down. And not everyone gets straight up when they get knocked down. They go through some things. And some never get back up, but some do. And then not only do they get back up, they move on to help others get back up. I find that type of story to lift my own spirits up. I find it extremely interesting. I find it a story that the world needs to hear more of because there's so many people out there who are in dark places, who are looking for hope, who are looking for a sign of light. And my guest today is all these things. So, this is a man who he went from building custom homes, successful guy, to being homeless, to drugs and alcohol, to eventually prison. And what happened to him in prison is quite magical and very profound. I'm not going to tell you that right now. I'm going to let him tell that story. And that led him on to the work he does today, which is also very profound and very uplifting. So with all of those things being said, please welcome my guest today, Michael Molthan.
Man, that was nice. Man, I can't wait to hear what I'm about to say. But that was what a great introduction. That was you're good. You're good, and I'm honored to be here. And thank you for this connection and me being here. And today I get to tell my story. And that's the cool thing about it.
Yeah, you're still here to say it. I think you're one of those folks that just pushed it right to the razor's edge.
Oh man, I was introduced to speak at an event one time, and it was kind of funny. The MC says, we got the real live Forrest Gump here. His stories are actually really true. So
you have the accent.
Yeah, that's right. So.
Well, tell us a bit about that. I mean, I highlighted it a little bit. Let's walk our audience through your story. I mean, I know it starts off when you're young and there's abuse in the picture, which leads on to some success, the alcohol, the drugs. I don't want to say anymore. Yeah. You bring us down that journey.
Well, when I share my story, the template, I go with is what it was like, what happened and what it's like today. Mm-hmm. The what it was like, I keep it real short, as far as what it was like. My story's out there, it's everywhere. I'm sure you'll post a link and everything like that where they can see the full story. But yeah, I am a recovered drug addict and alcoholic, and I was turning to drugs and alcohol at a very young age because I wanted to feel like everybody around me looked. And so
interesting way to put that.
Yeah, so as I was drinking alcohol and doing drugs, it gave me that sense of ease and comfort, and it put me in this false reality of being in the now where the future, that noise shut down, the past, that noise shut down. Mm-hmm. It helped me process fear. It was all euphoria. It wasn't real. But as it got worse and worse, from 10 years old all the way up until, almost 7 years ago, I I ended up drinking alcohol and doing drugs because I wanted to feel good about the bad decisions I was making, you know, and that's what this deadly disease, you know, takes us. And when I speak, you know, I make it real clear, you know, when I'm speaking in the addiction world, the alcoholism world, the recovery world is I drank alcohol, I did drugs for the effect. That's why I did it. It wasn't because I was abused, sexually abused, dealt a bad deck, the things that were done wrong to me that would confuse me, that weren't okay. But when I was in the disease, the way I responded to these things weren't okay either. You know, so I had to play a role. I played a huge role in it as well, until I had this awakening and I started looking at life through God's perspective. And me personally, I got the answers to, if there's a God, why would he allow this to happen? You know what I mean? We hear that a lot, you know, and I was that person too. I'm not that person anymore, you know, because I see life through God's perspective, which is what my mission is today, is to share my story, not to influence other or not to gain popularity, but it's simply to pass on through my personal experiences, how to see life through God's perspective and not the world's.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. You know, and I will use the word universe a lot just because I'm probably more Eastern influenced in my spirituality. And you're using the word God, which is a more Christian, Western based word for the same thing, in my opinion. And the way you said that, I totally felt that, which is, it's so easy to point fingers. And why did life do this to me? And then suddenly that moment where you're like, well, actually, I was the one making those choices. I didn't have to do the drugs tonight. I didn't have to drink tonight. I did. And now I'm looking at the world. I'm pointing you know, as long as we're in that blame state, recovery is impossible. You know, that's taking responsibility for how you got in this predicament, you know? Yes.
And, you know, the key moment, the awakening for me after my 27th mugshot, and I'll back up to my story as you asked, but was, you know, you hear the textbook, which is now cliche. If you have a problem with drugs and alcohol, reach out and ask for help. That's true. And that's accurate. Get honest, you know, admit that you're powerless over, you know, alcohol or drugs and that your life is completely unmanageable. I did that and I was still drinking and using. But for me, the true honesty and the awakening for me was when I said, I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And that's where I invited the supernatural in, you know, to flex its muscle.
Yeah, you got to create some space for it.
Yeah. And the thing is, I had to be willing to go to any length to change, and it wasn't going to be my way. You know, my whole life I wanted it to be my bougie way, and it was far from that.
Well, and back to your story, just to highlight that a little bit, you're out there building homes, you're doing well, and you're using drugs now, and you got arrested 27 times. That's a heck of a. You're not a quitter.
Yeah, right. No, I'm hard-headed. I'm hard-headed.
That's what I meant by that.
Yeah, I was self-will run riot. But, you know, I grew up in North Dallas, and, you know, my dad was very successful, and I grew up in a family with mom and dad, and I have a brother. And, you know, outside our house, everything looked, you know, really good. You know, I grew up in the country clubs. You know, I grew up playing golf. I had everything that most people didn't have. But one of the main things I did is I didn't not have a biblical upbringing. I didn't have a father, you know, in my life. He was there, but he was a workaholic. That's what he was taught to do. So discipline was physical. It was confusing. On top of that, being, you know, in the midst of being sexually abused by my grandfather at the time, and, you know, on my mom's side, and, you know, then my parents always talking so bad about him, how much they hated him, and then also, you know, saying that my mannerisms were like him, my handwriting was like him, and that, you know, I was going to grow up to be just like him. But little did they know what was really happening. Wow. So there was a lot of confusion there.
Of course.
I was totally different from my brother. And my brother was straight up L7, square, you know. I was, you know, I'm both sides of the brain. I'm left and right. You know, I'm business savvy, but yet I'm extremely creative, you know, and I love being creative, which carried over to the, you know, I did high-end luxury homes. The air was real thin, you know, where the homes, you know, the people I built houses for.
Right.
You know, we're talking about $5 million to $20 million homes.
Wow.
So anyways, as it, you know, progressed, I married my best friend that I knew since kindergarten growing up. We had 2 kids, but prior to that, when I got out of high school, I went straight to the pro golf tour, the PGA tour, growing up playing golf, and I was a good golfer. And, the men that raised me were the men in the locker room of the country club. Mm-hmm. So the way that they talked and what they did and all that stuff, they taught me how to gamble. They taught me how to do business, real estate deals. At a very young age, I'm riding around and hanging out with very successful people who were, twice my age, and they loved me because they thought I was that age too, the way I carried myself. Mm-hmm. But they were also teaching me how to die, and I copied their solutions to worldly problems. Mm. And they were in fear, but they didn't talk about it or show it. They were reaching out for visible things to fix their invisible problems too. Mm-hmm. So I carried these tools on, and then all the way up until, my wife at the time, life was going really good. And at the time she had a major brain hemorrhage in 2009. And that's when my life changed forever. And families fighting and money involved and, just a bunch of stuff that was confusion. And I didn't know how to handle, these feelings. And so people saying things about me that weren't true, the gossip and all this stuff. And the way I handled the situation started it making look like what they were saying might be true,
Right.
Backing up prior to that, when I was on the pro golf tour, I met a lady and on the tour and got her pregnant. She had a son. She already had a daughter, and I adopted that daughter, Kayla and Brandon. And Brandon is biologically mine. And I adopted Kayla, and I did them wrong. I mean, I was with her a year. I did them wrong. I mean, I just did them wrong. Mm. If there's anybody that has the right to hate me and never talk to me, I did them wrong. I abandoned them. I was, I lied. I did everything I could. I was a bookie, and it was sick. It was sick what I did to them. And I abandoned them for a long time. And then when I got off the pro golf tour, I married, my best friend growing up with, and something happened. We had our first child, and I just knew something was out there bigger than me, but I was, completely agnostic. I mean, nothing about religion or anything like that. But I wanted to be a good dad because I didn't want to do what I did before. Mm. And I really put my life into that in business and became very successful from a worldly standard of home building. And then, as a father, but little did I know in 2009, the detour that I'd be placed on, and then 27 mugshots, was homeless, living in a stolen suburban 300 miles away on the run. I'll never forget this, Aaron. When I got my very first arrest in mugshot, it really affected me. I got arrested. I'm taken down to the jail. All the cackling and people talking and the guards. In Dallas, the jail is 6,700 people population. Ooh. And when they took me down there, my first arrest was a 2nd-degree felony. I had a lot of cocaine on me. I was under the influence. And they took me in there. I got my first mugshot. And when I got that mugshot, and I didn't know how to bond out or anything like that, and they bonded me out. And right before I got bonded out, I said, I'm never doing this again. This is it. This is my rock bottom. And I meant it. I meant it with every ounce of blood in my body. And I get back to my place and I said, you know what? I'm feeling a little anxious. I just need a drink to taper off. I'm just going to, just taper off this process. And that mugshot really bothered me. And, people were, using it against me and stuff like that. And that's how I learned SEO. But I meant it. I was never going to drink or use again. And 26 mugshots later, I had this awakening that like no other.
Yeah, it's easy for it to creep back in. Obviously, I mean, now there's added stress. You have been arrested, and you have this reputation. Yeah. I mean, hell, you were on the PGA tour. I mean, we're not talking about some, what
for the best golfer in the world.
Really?
Yeah, the best golfer in the world. So, I mean,
you were on the way to the top.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so
I was at 21 years old making, 6 figures a year, flying private. I was the bookie on the PGA tour, and wow, I was ripping and running.
Well, I guess my point is you're already a person with a giant spotlight on you.
Yeah.
And so getting arrested, that spotlight is, if you're just some guy that works over at some little place and nobody knows his name, and you can kind of get arrested and no one will probably really hear about it too much. But when you got arrested, it was boom, first page
I was,
news.
Building in the Park Cities in Dallas, which is, it's Highland Park and University Park, and it's about 6 square miles, and it's the wealthiest area in America. And so it was very embarrassing. It was shameful. But what's amazing, we'll get to it, is that they were confused. They didn't know what was going on. And the thing is that I'm the type that I stuff and I bury. I burn my own house down. And I just let people go at me. And all this, I was protecting my family like I did before with my grandfather. I would never share anything because I didn't want anything. I mean, I witnessed my grandfather just physically beat my grandmother to the ground so he can come into the bedroom. And I wanted to make sure he knew I was awake so he wouldn't mess with my brother, And so, and then, on that 27th, arrest, I knew it was over. I mean, Judge Bennett is now one of my closest friends, and I always say she's my professional photographer. And so when I was arrested the 27th time on May 29th, 2017, I knew it was over. And, going down there and, before I saw her, that's when I said to myself, and of course, not to God or anything like that, I said to myself, I said, I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing. I'm done, And what was amazing is that when I kept getting arrested, when you get arrested, they diagnose you. And one of the awakenings I had the last time I got arrested is that you fill out a card and you put your address in there and you put emergency contact number. And I literally couldn't put anything down. I had no address. I had no emergency contact person, and I didn't even have a phone number.
So that was like a moment you're like, I don't even have anyone people can call anymore because everyone had
stamped it. They stamped it indigent. They went indigent. And so that right there, I'm like, now I'm becoming one of these guys. I mean, they knew my name when I was coming in. And in fact, my prison name was Rabbit. Everybody called me Rabbit, because I was so hyper. I mean, I just couldn't pull it together. And, when I was, locked up, I'm white and proper. So when I would go into the tank, I'm the only white guy in there. Proper, so they thought I was either a cop or gay, you know what I mean? And so, and I was neither of them. And so I was, very quiet. But this last time when they diagnosed, they always put me in the assault tank. They diagnose you. They put the chomos in one tank, the child molesters. They put, the homosexuals in one, and they put, the low grade, the misdemeanor, all that. But they kept putting me into the assault tank. So in Dallas, it was this tank called North Towers, the 4th floor, and they call it the Jungle. And it's rock and roll. And so, I was in there every time they put me in there. So I'd be in a 2-man cell, locked down for 18 to 20 hours a day. And when we get out, I would just pace and pace and pace. I just pace. And this last arrest, I was on the top bunk, and then the open bunk opened up, and I couldn't wait to get to the bottom bunk. Here I am coming from a 10,000 square foot home, and I'm excited to get the bottom bunk because the top bunk blocks the lighting, and you get about 2 more inches of room on the bed, Okay. And so this old man comes in, and he's he's like 75 years old, and he's back on a bench warrant, and he's doing life for murder, and he's got polio. And so I got to give him the bottom bunk. You know what I mean? I'll get chewed off the bone. So I give him the bottom bunk, and his name is Ooey. And prior to that, a guy that was in the tank, just gave me a book, and it was this white book with a boring cover. It was called Detours by Dr. Tony Evans. I just threw him my deal. I didn't want to read anything. And we're locked up, and Ooey says, what's that book? When I read the cover to him, he says, oh, Dr. Tony Evans. I love me some Dr. Tony Evans. And he says, will you read to me? And I said, read? He says, yeah, I can't read or write. And that blew me away that you couldn't read. I mean, we take it for granted.
Right.
So I started reading it to him, and it was a story of Joseph and how he's abandoned and sold, his family turned on, all this stuff. I could relate to this. But when I was first reading it, I was reading it and being the victim, right? But the more and more I read to Ooey, the more and more it started making sense to me. And then on July 7th, 2017, it was my top bunk, and I couldn't breathe. I mean, I just could not breathe. And I stood up, and I just exhaled, and all this anger and fear and resentment and paranoia, all was just coming out of my body. And I took this deep breath in, and I was just filled with ice water. And I felt love for the first time.
Hmm.
I wasn't showing it, but I was looking around like going, dude, I love you. And I looked down at Uwe and I loved him. And that's when I had the awakening. These days when I was reading to him, I was doing easy time. I wasn't thinking about the future, the past, or when am I going to get out. And I had this awakening, and I realized that I was serving Uwe, expecting nothing in return. And for the first time, I was out of self. And that's when I started seeing things through God's perspective, that I was serving him, expecting nothing in return. And then, I have really cool handwriting, they say. So I'm writing something and I'm out in the tank, the day room, and God sees my handwriting and what are you writing and what's that say? And I'm like, what do you mean, what does it say? And I'm journaling from the book Detours, which eventually led me into started investigating more, reading the Living Recovery Bible, because I was just I wasn't this jailhouse preacher, like, saying stuff,
Right.
But he says, what's it say? And I go, what do you mean? He goes, I can't read, I can't write. I'm like, and the whole tank couldn't. And so as I was reading to them, they would even ask me to get up at chow time and read some of the book, Detours, and they could relate to it. And so I started reading to the whole tank. And the tank came closer and closer together, and the guards were amazed how we were serving one another.
Wow.
As a result of this book. Yeah.
Power of love.
Yeah.
The power of getting out of yourself, finding something you can do for another human being.
Yeah.
And that makes a lot, and sometimes you grew up affluent, and an affluent life cannot be the blessing in life.
Right.
And often isn't, because, I think sometimes when people are not affluent, the repercussions of their mistakes hit them really directly, really quickly.
Yep.
They don't have the money to be bailed out of jail. They don't have influence with the, whatever the influence is to get out. So they get served up more quickly, but with little money and influence and reputation, you can defer that moment much, 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 much longer.
Today's culture, it pushes to be educated and more educated and more educated and get smarter and smarter and smarter. That's good. Okay. And I grew up that way, trying to be smarter and smarter and smarter than everybody else, but I had no spirituality. Okay. So it was all worldly, views, and how God used an uneducated, unqualified murderers to wake me up. Harvard couldn't teach me that, and so it was amazing. And just to finish it is that, I caught chain and went down to Central Texas, and then, to go to prison, and, they put me in a rock and roll tank. I've seen guys get killed in front of me. And I know you had a guest, Matt, was it Mohawk Matt?
Mohawk Matt.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, he's right about all the stuff you hear in prison and all that stuff. It's a myth. People ride good together, and I can relate to them, missing those guys.
Right.
And so I get transferred down to Central Texas, and I get sent into another rock and roll tank, and it's nasty. Okay. I see a guy get killed in front of me, and I just go in there, and a guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm just doing me." And he says, "Man, I like your handwriting. What are you reading?" And I said, "Well, I'm reading this. You want to read it?" And he says, "I can't read." And so I did the same thing in that tank. And then on October 13th, 2017, they came up with the speaker. I did 4.5 years, out of 6 years, and they came over to the speaker, and they said, Michael Molthan, bunk and junk. And the whole tank's just going nuts. Even the guards are going nuts. And
in other words, that means you're getting
free.
out. Oh. Okay.
And so they checked in the state of Texas. They got on the computer and it says released, and there was no order, no nothing. I mean, I was doing my time. I mean, I wasn't even up for parole or anything like that. And so they literally had to push me out of prison. And I was thinking, man, I don't want to go through, booking. Booking's horrible. People have been locked up, getting booked in and all that stuff. You want to get to your rack and start doing your time. And so they literally had to push me out. And that's where, instead of every time I'd get out, the gas of the world would hit me and I would spin off. But this time, I turned to God and I said, "What do you want me to do?" And, he spoke to me, and I hear people say that. And I said, I thought that was witchcraft, but he spoke to me through thoughts and feelings because of this connection. He said, "Walk." And so I made the journey 300 miles, back to Judge Bennett's court to turn myself in.
Like, hey, there was a mistake and I should not be free.
There was a technicality, but it wasn't. It wasn't a technicality. She goes, "You know what? I don't know what's happening. I don't want to get in the way of it. But I see the transformation in you." She saw something, and that taught me something. And she goes, "I've heard, you haven't told me, I've heard about what you've been doing behind the walls because of guys who have come to her to say, this guy that I was locked up with changed my life. And she goes, I don't want to get in the way of that. And I want you to go pay it forward. And that's what I'm doing today. And I didn't like do a business plan locked up saying I'm going to be a speaker and all that stuff. I didn't know what I was going to do. I really didn't care. And so here I am today, almost 7 years later, paying it forward, basically reading to people.
Fuck, dude.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful, beautiful story. And I mean,
I still don't know what I'm doing. I mean, it's just like how I met you and got on this show. I mean, at M2 The Rock, I've never reached out to do something. It's always been, my whole deal is about attraction, not promotion.
By the way, people, I forgot to mention that he's otherwise known as M2 The Rock.
Right.
Maybe tell people why that, I know what that means.
So it's Michael Molthan is 2 M's, so M2. Right. And then The Rock is what saved my life because we hear rock bottom. And I kept hitting rock bottom over and over, right? We all have a rock bottom, right? I finally realized that the rock at the bottom and all these times was God. So I decided to stay at the bottom and let men in recovery and godly men pull me out. Because every time I hit rock bottom, my character defects, is what got me to rock bottom. It wasn't drinking and drugging. It was my character defects. And when I said I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing, I use their solution to get out. Because I'd use those same character defects to get out of rock bottom. I'm going to show you. I mean, I'd even the Rocky music playing, dun, 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 and doing all that. And it's a cycle. They used to say, Michael, we see it coming. It's a cycle. It's a cycle. But today, I recognize the behaviors and I have tools.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm 52 years old and I've got my own.
You look good.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. My wife owns a med spa. I may have Botox. I may have some Botox on my forehead. But
they didn't offer that in prison, by the way.
They don't have a little clinic for that stuff. But no, I just, and I am a tattoo artist and I've worked in the industry for 30 years and, the tattoo industry is very, very professional and clean now. But, in my early years, I rolled around with a lot of rough people that were doing a lot of things you're talking about. I myself stayed on the outskirts for the most part. There were some situations I had to take part in because if you didn't, you were kicked out of the club, and I couldn't get kicked out of the club because I wanted to be a tattooer. Right. Nothing crazy, but just, running around with these guys and helping them score drugs or whatever the crazy shit of the day was. Yeah. But I've been around a lot of that in my early years, and I've seen the story you're describing happen so many times. I'm a spiritual man as well. You use the word God, I use the word universe. I am 100% convinced through things I've seen and been through that there is a creator out there. There is somebody who loves us, something that loves us, who's something that if you turn to it, it will provide pathways for you where you might need to be. Right. But you really have to open yourself to it. Right. And it just sits and it waits. Right. And you can sit there and try, like you were saying, like use those tools that you thought you were gonna fix everything with these tools, and you would use your tools and it would get broken again. Right. And broken. You're like, okay, these tools are not working. Right. So I'm just gonna kind of open myself and see what happens. And what happened is your true destiny, I would call it. Yeah.
Which is what that book was about, detours, finding your destiny.
How funny. It all started there too. Yeah. I just find it highly coincidental that you end up with that book, that you end up with that cellie, that you end up in that particular situation that through thousands of micro events leads you to the person you are today that's helping hundreds of thousands of people. Yeah. That to me, if you want to call it God, that is God. That is what it's doing for all of us all the time. Yeah. So just, all of those people listening right now, sometimes what's needed in your life isn't doing something. We're doers, humans, right? Right. If there's a problem, we want to physically move and fix. But sometimes what needs to be done is just to be quiet. Right. And wait and listen to the voice. And I like how you put the voice too, because I think sometimes in the Christian community, you hear people say, God spoke to me. And maybe for some people, God literally, it's like a big booming voice from a puffy white cloud and he speaks to you. Maybe that does happen. I don't know. I'm not in their heads.
Maybe if you're on acid.
Yeah, maybe. But I do think the universe speaks to us, but it doesn't use English. It uses intuition. It uses feelings. It uses, and if you get quiet enough, you'll hear that stuff. Right. Like, I am feeling the need to do this. Right. I'm feeling like I shouldn't be here. I should be over there. Right. And I think that is opening yourself up to the power of God or the universe. And Your story just highlights it so perfectly. I just wanted to kind of restate that. That's very beautiful, very cool.
I can relate to that, and I don't go around and like start off a conversation, hey, listen, I'm a Christian. I am a follower and believer of Jesus Christ. When someone does that to me to start a conversation as far as an icebreaker, my walls go up because I want to show it and people feel it. Because I do remember growing up that I would see men, even when I was on the pro golf tour, there were some players at the time like Bernhard Langer and Larry Mize and Larry Nelson. And these guys, when they walk onto the golf course, Tom Landry, the great coach of the Dallas Cowboys, these guys never proclaimed to be Christians. They were deep faith-based Christians, but they never said that. It was just their presence. It's just something like, you feel that when someone walks in a room, you just feel that aura about is something special. Yeah. And we also feel it the other way. It's like, no, this person's dark. I'm not feeling it.
100%.
That's what I do is I want to show the world who Christ is. I want to show the world who God is just by my actions and what I say. Because I'm great at doing that because I showed the world who I was as a result of drugs and alcohol because it showed externally, right? And today I seek the invisible for external problems, and it shows, visibly. That's recovery. Yeah.
Well,
does that make sense?
It does. Walking the walk, right?
Yeah. We've dumbed down the deity of God's easy to say, but we've dumbed down. I dumbed down the deity of the gospel. Where it makes it easier to say God and all that stuff. And that's what works for me because I didn't understand it. And, when I understand it, when it comes to church and religion, I'm agnostic. For me personally, when it comes to the word of God, I'm all in. And so I want to show it. Yeah, I want to show it.
And people feel that. People will.
Because I'm a punk, you know what I mean? Because I sin, my thoughts are sin, And so these church words that we hear, I like to deliver this message to so people better understand it.
Yeah, and I grew up Catholic, not super serious, but when I was young, my grandparents, we went to church on Sundays, and after church, I went to some Sunday Bible studies, and there was just a lot of very hypocritical people involved in that group, and it just ruined it. I mean, I was basically an atheist my whole life because I'm like, well, wait a minute, you guys are all here talking about all these nice things, but then I saw you last night, shit-faced drunk, telling your wife to fuck off.
Right.
So, okay, this doesn't seem like the place I want to, this isn't the group I want to be a part of. And then it took me many years, and my discovery of spirit happened much more through some use of psychedelics, but a lot of reading of Taoism and Buddhism. And in various experiences, I got to touch and feel that source, and it guides me to this day.
Right.
But that might be part of the journey. There's stories about being you kind of cast out of the kingdom and finding your way back.
Right.
Right. You almost have to be kicked out of it and not believe in it, and then find your path back to it. Because once you do that, it's real to you.
Right. Because
just to tell somebody, I believe in A, B, and C. Why do you believe that? Well, because I went to this place and they told me to believe it, and I believe it.
Right.
I mean, if that works for you, I'm not wired like that.
Right.
I can't take anything. I have to do it myself.
Right.
I have to feel it myself. Otherwise, I'm like, I don't know. And I think you probably must be on some level in your soul somewhere. You're the same type of guy. No one could have told you God was real and this is the way. You had to go through this long circle of trial and tribulation for that to be a real experience for yourself.
Right.
And because it was such a real experience, you're 100% firm in your belief of the power of the universe, the power of God.
Right. Well, I like what you just shared there is here's a church word, to be a witness. We hear this, be a witness for Christ and be a witness for, I'm like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? And I understand today what that is that the true witness is that when I do slip and fail, and I'm not showing, where a hypocrite has the opportunity to jump on it. That's what I use my platform for, is what you just said is, hey man, I got off the beam today and this is what I learned from it. And then I realized the reason why I was acting this way, because I was in fear. So I was trying to play God, and guess what God will do? He'll let me play God for everything to get completely out of control for me to hit my knees to turn to him to realize I had no control in the first place, and so that's what I like to talk about. I put myself on blast. That's all I do, just put myself on blast.
Well, that's what's needed. I mean, I think what you're describing to me right there is you're articulating this thing in a way that's much more relatable in today's day and age than the way the Bible was written, however many years, thousands of years ago. I think that the way they wrote that really worked at that time. People, that's how they talked. That's how they listened. That's what made sense. And I think that it loses a lot of traction in today's culture because we're a different people now. And I think guys like me in my way and guys like you in your way to be able to tell these stories from a more practical standpoint, just a real down to earth, this is what happened, man. This is me when I thought I could control my life. This is my results. This is how happy I was. These are the people that I hurt. And this is me when I threw my hands in the air and allowed it to move through me, to be in flow state with the universe. I don't know. There's just an articulation there that I think is really is necessary because I don't think as we've expanded into science so much in the last 200 years, that's the solution. You can see that out there, we got laser beams, we got satellites, and we're still dropping bombs on babies. So not saying we don't need laser beams and satellites. Those things probably will cure cancer and figure out new ways to create clean water. But there is a lot of room for the spirit to come back into culture. If you look at history, communities of people have always worshipped the stars. There was always a place in life for that. But in the last, however, I'm not a real good historian, but recently it doesn't seem like culture really highlights that unless you're born into a very, religious family. But for the rest of us, which I wasn't, for the rest of us, you're just left to wander the streets and figure it out.
To fill that empty hole. That we hear, talk about. That's a good point. I toured all this year and speaking on that we are all addicts, and everything that we hear in the news today, which you're talking about, all this stuff that we're seeing and all this stuff, my whole life, my personal experience, I was always watering the leaves of the tree, wondering why the tree was dying. What's the real root of the problem? And so my personal experience and the guys I was locked up with is that, our real crisis today, the real root of the problem is the missing man. The fathers, the fathers have abandoned the role in families. And what's happening is that, we have, single moms trying to do a job of a man and they're not engineered that way. And that's where it just snowballs into our culture today. And people like me, looking up to men that are doing the same thing, and it just passes on. So I love to talk about that, not today, but I mean, that's what I speak a lot.
The nuclear family is what you're talking about. Exactly. The nuclear family has not been of very good service to the health of our communities. Until we get that right,
it bleeds through, once we get that right, it bleeds into the neighborhood, it bleeds into the churches, it bleeds into the city, the state, the county, everything all the way up to the world.
How do we? And you're getting into some deep water with that one because we can't put this ride in reverse, because I think humans did function relatively well 5,000 years ago when you had a little group of 120 people living in 10,000 acres, and everybody knew each other, and there was a role. There was the medicine man. There was the wise old man. There was a community. There was a community. And everyone, if you weren't raised by a mother, you were raised by the tribe. Everyone in that tribe. You had not one father figure. You had 20 hunters that would take you out, each one like a big brother to you. Then when you got home and you were bleeding because you fell off a rock, there was 20 mothers that mended you back. And then when you felt confused or lost, there was 4 or 5 medicine men that would take you on a spirit journey for 3 days. And so these small groups of hunter-gatherers healed. It was a very symbiotic system, and it worked very well. Just like when you watch nature, when you watch a pack of elk or you watch a pack of wolves, you don't see them. They don't seem very confused. Everyone's doing exactly what they're supposed to do. We, for whatever reason, humans are born with this crazy curiosity to build and create and expand. And I have a feeling, I don't believe the universe makes mistakes. So I know it's for a reason. I don't ultimately know what it is. So we're in this very difficult phase. We have left the thing that worked, and we're moving towards something, I think, fantastic, but we're in the middle right now. And it is a difficult spot to be because
what it is, and based off my personal experience, what I did, I want more. you know?
Yeah.
And so once again, I was always seeking, visible things to fix my invisible problems. If you break it down to addiction, what is addiction? And
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Tell me that. What is addiction?
So addiction, the go-to is drugs and alcohol. That's the stigma that's out there. And why is that? It's because, our behaviors are so severe. The consequences are so severe, to all the drug addicts and alcoholics watching this and listening to it, in recovery is not about getting good. It's about getting well, and also the redemption stories are so powerful, right? But addiction is it's the street name for spiritual stronghold, false idols. Let me even break it down more. Addiction is a person, place, thing, and here's the scary one, or a thought that becomes my source. Okay? And so when I'm looking at that, it becomes my source. For example, money. If money becomes my source, I become unmanageable. I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father and all that, because that's all I'm chasing is this, and I can never get enough. Same thing with heroin and gambling, pornography, shopping, service work. I mean, I see a lot of people that are addicted to helping others and staying busy. They don't sit down because they're scared to sit down to look at themselves. I was that way, So that's what, the real thing of addiction is. So with that said, we're all addicts. Everybody's an addict. And what is a solution? And the solution is to have the invisible that is our go-to. That's our source, and that's where I really started, growing in my faith. I'm not theologically sound. I know I just can't sit here and go, that's a good point. Well, scripture says, I'm not there yet. And when I get there, it's in my head. I said, well, scripture says this. How can I deliver it to them where it doesn't sound so Christianese? You know what I mean?
Right. Christianese.
Christianese, because the worst witnesses out there right now, for the Christian community are the Christians, because they're right and we're wrong. Yeah. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. But that's what addiction is.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. That's a very good way to put that. And, I was lucky enough. I didn't realize how lucky I was. Looking back, I realized how lucky I was. My parents divorced when I was probably in the 6th grade or something. And my dad, he was definitely a workaholic back then. Good father. I mean, he never did any or abused us. He just worked, man. That to him, that was love. Like, I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to provide, Yeah. And so dad's not around a lot. He work. And now they're divorced. And he, I think through the divorce, had some intimate moments with himself, really looking at what had brought him to the place of ending up divorced and this problem he's currently in. Yeah. And so he ended up going, oddly enough, to this seminar called PSI seminars, People Synergistically Involved. I mean, I was in the 6th grade, so I don't even know what we're talking here, 45 years ago. It's kind of a self-help group. Yeah. Or not self-help, but I don't know, these groups that teach you to manifest and all this stuff, And this was early times before The Secret was written and all this books on manifestation. Yeah. So the fact he even found something like that's like a miracle, because there wasn't much of that around. So he goes off for a week or two, comes home, and I, as soon as he walks in the door, I'm just like you talked about earlier, I could feel, I'm like, who is this man? Right. This is not my father. Yeah. And he knelt down to me and my brother and, said, look, I've realized that my way I've been treating you guys, the way I've been has been wrong, and I will never treat you guys that way again. And then he got to the point where he's like, I want you. I was older. My brother was too young at the time. He's like, Aaron, I want you to go to this seminar. And long story short, in that seminar, they basically described to me, I was in like the 6th or 7th grade, that the human is built of 4 sides. There's your health. It's a square. Health, wealth, which is how you make your money. Health is your human health. Relationships, that's what quality relationships do you have with your wife, your kids, your neighbors. And the last one was spirituality. And the model they were building is you want to keep that a square. Because if your spirituality is nothing, it's not a square anymore. It's some kind of like weird triangle shaped thing. And I just took it like, oh, interesting, but it planted a seed in me. It stuck. Yeah. And I always checked in with that, in times of trouble where sometimes it was my health. Yeah. Maybe I'm working so much that I've put on weight. I've got a headache in the morning and I don't feel good. Okay. Need to get the health bar built back up. Or I'm doing this and I'm doing that. I'm not spending time with my wife and we've been bickering a lot. There's the relationship part. I need to build that and so on and so forth. But I always would check in with that spiritual part. And for me, again, it was a lot of purposeful hallucinogenics, meditation, and a reading of Buddhism. But I'm very lucky to have been taught that at a young age, because if someone hadn't said that to me, I would have never thought that was part of being a successful human.
Yeah.
The ones that are obvious is you want to be buff and strong and health. That's obvious.
Yeah.
And relationships is obvious.
Yeah.
Money, wealth, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people just don't realize that is part of it, man. I don't care what you do. Like, you can go up to the Inuit culture in Alaska and learn how they connect to God.
Right.
Or you can go to the East and sit with the Taoists and do it that way.
Right.
Whatever. Or you can go to wherever, but find some way where you connect to the infinite.
Right.
It's vitally important to your health and well-being.
Right. What I heard, you brought up something I wanted to say is that, the number one thing that I believe that was killing me, was resentment. Mm-hmm. And working through resentments and accepting the role that I play in it. All right. And when I heard your dad, he was resentful towards himself. And he went and worked on himself and he forgave himself and he saw the role that he played in it. And then he made amends. Mm-hmm. 12-step recovery, the steps are in order for a reason. Mm-hmm. And we don't make amends until step 9. Mm-hmm. But we do step 4, and that's a moral inventory of ourselves. And a lot of people in the recovery world, hear this, like when I hear someone said, "Oh my God, the dreaded 4th step." No, if you're dreading it, it's because you didn't do step 3 right. And that's made a decision to turn our will and life over to the care of God as we understand him. Okay. It's a personal relationship. And so when we go on the 4th step, we do an inventory and we get to see what we're good at, but we put our resentments down and we look at the role we play in it. And this is a huge part of my awakening, was that when people go, "Well, wait a minute, Michael, your grandfather, what he did to you was wrong." Yeah, it was wrong. But you played a role in that? I did. Absolutely did. And my mentor, I think Ray Wiley Hubbard, who's my mentor, Stevie Ray Vaughan got him sober.
Yeah, you mentioned
and
that.
he, Ray's become, like a dad to me, and I talk to him all the time and run stuff by him. And the role I played in this resentment with my grandfather was I chose to hold on to the resentment, right? And that was part of my awakening on the top bunk, is that, and I will quote something like Matthew 6:14-15, it says, when we don't forgive, God won't bless our game. Okay. And what that means is that if I'm holding on to resentments, why is God going to bless my game? Because I'm just going to stuff the resentment down, chew his bubble gum till the sugar runs out, and then hold on to that resentment. I'm trapped. It blocks me from the universe. It blocks me from Christ, whatever you want to call it. It blocks me from that. Mm-hmm. But once I truly forgive, he blesses my game. And now I'm inviting the supernatural to come down and flex its muscle. So the story with that is, when I accepted that, I was driving to an event and I was just didn't know what I was going to talk about. A lot of times I don't. When coming here, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I just go in the bathroom and say, God put the words in my mouth, because if I script it, we're going to prison. Okay. So I walk into this event and I walk in and it was a treatment center. I very rarely speak at treatment centers, and I walk in this treatment center and I go in the men's bathroom, and there's 2 wall urinals, and there's one with a cubby where you shut the door on it. Well, there's a guy standing up in a wall urinal here. This one's available and someone's in there. So I waited for the guy to get out of there so I could go in the bathroom and shut the door, because my whole life I could never pee next to a guy standing next to me, never do slumber parties, never could shower in front of anybody else, and that is a symptom of sexual abuse, right? And so when I came out, there's a big whiteboard. I drew the bathroom and I told this story. Mm-hmm. And my point is that about resentments and the role we play in it. And I told the story, and 2 men on the front row, like bawling, crying. Mm. And one guy stayed after and was talking to me and says, "You just saved my life," because I could have never shared that, because that's exactly what I struggle with. Mm. Okay. And so I'm driving home and processing after I spoke. And today, as I see things through God's perspective, I'm like going, wow, God's using, as a result of me forgiving, God's using my grandfather to speak through me to help these people, right? 2 months later, my emails are blowing up. Aaron, I'm talking like thousands of emails coming in from prisons and jails all over the country saying, we love what you're doing. You're helping our cell. You're helping me. You saved my life. Woo, woo, woo. All this stuff. And I'm like, what is going on? And a reporter in Dallas, sent me over a picture or something like, check this out. And then I get an email from Securus Telecommunication. Securus Telecommunication is all government communication. White House, FBI, Pentagon, jails, prison, courts. They monitor phone calls and emails, everything coming in and out. It's its own deal, right? Well, the president, reached out to me and he says, you saved my son's life and he's still sober today because apparently somebody did something to him, right? As a result of that, he put M2 the Rock on every single tablet in every prison and every jail across the country. So this show will be downloaded for all the inmates to listen to that we're doing right now. Wow. And so they hear, as a result of me accepting and forgiving and seeing it through God's perspective and letting go of the resentment.
Dude,
and not even talking about my faith.
Right.
It's like, and that grabs their attention when I go, wow, I kind of want what this guy got,
And I love that. And forgiveness is one of my favorite topics. And you're highlighting, forgiveness of the other is tough. Forgiveness of ourselves, even tougher. But to not forgive is to not let that light in, man. If you can't let that go, if you can't find it in your heart to somehow forgive the other, and forgive yourself, that doesn't happen. This magic will never happen. And I think a lot of people, because I like that subject, so I'll bring it up a lot. Yeah. And the response I get from a lot of people is they're confusing forgiveness with allowance. So they think that their resentment protects them. And, a simple analogy would be, my neighbor, he screwed me over some way. We went on a deal together and he never gave me my money back. Fuck that guy,
What role do you play in it?
Well, right. First of all, acknowledge how, acknowledge your role in it. And accept it. But I think sometimes people think, well, I can't forgive him because if I forgive him, someone else will do that to me. So like the resentment and non-forgiveness becomes a wall of protection. Right. But it's the opposite, right? Because when you hang on to that resentment, when you hang on to that lack of forgiveness, you just attract another dude that does the same, because that frequency attracts that frequency. So I'm just like, man, if you really want to be self-serving, you really want to be a sociopath and only worry about yourself, the first thing you need to do is forgive everybody that hurt you. Right. That's the most selfish act you can do.
Well, and the main thing is that you said is to simplify it. Like you said, if I loan someone $5, and they don't pay me back and I have a resentment towards them, well, the role I got to look at if I have a resentment, it means I played a role in it. And I have to look at my role first, and I accept my role, because true forgiveness has no resentments, right?
Let me challenge you a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm just going to create a scenario.
Okay.
A 4-year-old child is playing at his house and his crack addicted mother's boyfriend starts the curtains on fire, which burns half of his body and creates a very big challenge for him most of his life. What role did he play in that?
So the role that he play in it, well, it depends on if the kid is growing up very resentful at life and he knows the story and he's resentful at this guy and his whole life is affected and everything that goes wrong, if someone cuts him off at this, stoplight, he blames it on this, this guy who, burned him, right? The role that he plays in it is the same as mine. Is we choose to hold on to the resentment, okay? And when we forgive and let that go, and we see it through a different perspective, like the situation with my grandfather, we're like, wow, okay? Because when he lets it go, that's when we are giving God permission to perform mercy and grace. We're giving him permission to do that. And that's when he flexes his muscle and he turns that burn victim into a testimony, not on whatever platform God wants to put them,
But you've come at this at a different perspective than I'm used to hearing it. I agree. So the role, because really what happened to that child is the child did, in the actual incident that occurred, nothing wrong. He was just there at the wrong place at the wrong time. But the years of resentment that the child holds onto over an event that's over and done is the role that the child, now grown man, is still playing in that. That is I see that.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
So it's that's why the $5 example is so easy. I'm not resentful towards you, dude. I gave it to you. That's easy. Why? But when it gets bigger and we start classifying it, but they do grow. And the thing is resentments. It's kind of like I was talking to someone and helping them out. And I said, make a resentment list. And they said, man, I don't have any resentments. And I go, wow, okay. Well, give me a list of people who owe you an apology. He goes, okay. So he made this long list. I said, well, you just wrote your resentment list, right?
Gotcha.
So no one owes me an apology. To this day, I have no resentments. Morbid reflection is very dangerous to everyone. We talk about it's when we're laying in bed at night, plotting and scheming how we're going to get even with these people. And what that is, Aaron, that is the Satan, the disease, evil, dark side, whatever you want to call it. That's that entity at work. Doing that. And we end up, we don't go to sleep and we're exhausted. And the person we have morbid reflection on, they slept just fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. You're not hurting the person that you want to get even with. You're just hurting yourself, which is sort of like counterintuitive to what the thing you're trying to do.
Yeah. So true acceptance has no resentments.
I think that's just the overarching theme here is acceptance.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can sit there and spin around in your head about everything that ever happened to you, should or shouldn't have happened, what not, everything you said, should or shouldn't said. At some point, and everyone has these lists. How long is it going to take before you just take that deep breath and say to the universe, "Fuck it"? By the way, that's why I tattooed "fuck it" right there on my hands. Fuck it. But to me, the statement "fuck it" is that moment of acceptance.
Yeah.
That's what "fuck it" means to me.
Yeah.
It's that moment of like, fuck it. I can't carry this weight. I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. All that matters is I accept that this universe doesn't make mistakes, and whatever happened was for a reason, and I'm here today, and onward you go. And acceptance, forgiveness and resentments wash away in that moment automatically.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you said there is that, for me, when the pain got bad enough, okay,
right.
for me to realize, okay, that, and it was in prison, okay, that everything was wiped out of my life, my kids, my family. I don't have a relationship with anybody with the last name Molthan. I've accepted that. I get to show him who I am today. I don't ever say, I'm not that man anymore. I've never said that. I show it. But when the pain got bad enough for me, after that 27th mugshot, I finally realized that God, okay, was all I had. Okay. God was all I needed because he was all I had. That was it. And then when I got released, the gas of the world hits us and I catch myself, I'm like, seeing stuff like that. But I'm reminded every single day, May 29th, 2017. And the awakening is that's what I realized, that he was all I needed because he was all I had.
Sometimes some people need a little more heat to find that place than others.
Hey, listen, God will let us have all the control we want, for everything to get completely out of control, for me to hit my knees, to turn to him, to say, I realize I didn't have control in the first place. Prayer is very, very special to me, right? But I'm not a hit my knees and all this stuff. I'm just in constant communication, and I'm not a King James Version prayers. I talk to God just like I talk to you. Say, God, man, I need help on this. I mean, I don't know. Explain this to me, because it's a personal relationship. He's my father. Yeah.
I got this. I do the same. I do the same thing.
I get down, and that's what he wants. Get down with me. Get all these big words out of your mouth. You're not being honest with God is good all the time. Thank you for this food. He didn't hear that.
Yeah. He wants you to be real.
Real.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm tripping. Please make it clear. And the way God speaks to me is through people, through people. And God will use ungodly people to do his work too.
Send you a little adjutant or something to.
Well, good stuff too.
Yeah. Both of them.
Yeah. If I'm listening.
Yeah.
I finally took the cotton out of my ears and put it in my mouth.
I love it, dude. I love it. And I relate so much to all the things you're saying here today.
And I relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, I think, we're saying the same thing. I did. Yeah. I guess this question doesn't seem as relevant anymore because you're not a King James Bible Christian, which I was not hoping. I was like, if he is, I'm really going to try to tangle up with him on the afterlife because,
Come on.
I believe that the universe, the thing, God, universe, it's there and we all go. I don't even want to say where we go, but we all go somewhere better, something, it's all going to work out. The Buddhists will tell you that you reincarnate over and over and over again, working out, teasing out these issues and growing. And at some point, you no longer reincarnate into physical form, but the work continues in more of a spirit realm,
Right.
and on it goes. And it happens to be the model I subscribe to. One, my early exposure. Two, things I saw when I did DMT, and I felt like there was entities that confirmed that. And so then I kind of felt like, well, the Christians might have it wrong, but then over time I was like, no, that model works too. And ultimately I think people are saying the same thing. It's just that the Christian model always bothered me because it's the idea of one life. But I struggle with that because you see some people who just get dealt the shittiest hand, and I'm just like, well, that doesn't seem very fair. If we all come here once, here's me, born in America, I got all these opportunities around me and I like to feel like I'm so successful. But the reality is I was just placed in a very easy realm where if I just tried a little and worked hard, success just came. Then I look at some guy maybe in a foreign country there's no resources, there's no healthcare, there's nothing. And I'm no smarter than him or her. I'm no better than him and her. I just happen to be put here and they were put there. And so then the Christian model, I'm just like, that doesn't seem fair. But then the Buddhist model, I'm like, well, that could, they would say that's karma. That person is burning off karma from a previous life. And in order to do that, he or she was born in a community without clean water and healthcare, and so that always made a little more sense to me. But what do you have to say in reference to that as a kind of Christian? I mean, do you see the other? Like, I just basically in the end believe there are hundreds, thousands, I don't even know, paths to God. Buddhism being one, right. Christianity being another. I guess I don't think you're going to say this, but a lot of Christians do say, no. Like the Mormons and all these guys, there's one path. And if you're not on it, then you ain't going. You're not going to wherever we go. Right. And that always bothered me. It seemed like that's not very fair. I don't think you're one of those people, but I'd like to hear how you would speak towards that.
Well, this is what I believe. I believe that there is a God, okay? And he sent his son to earth through the Virgin Mary. And the reason why he did that is because he didn't want the DNA of Adam in Jesus, so he could come to earth as human and God. So he could say, what's going on down here? Y'all ain't listening to me. I got to feel what y'all feel, okay? And I believe that the only way is by accepting Jesus Christ as your personal savior, to get to the afterlife. I truly believe that. Now, that's not putting me over here or up here and y'all down here. I believe that, right? I'm not that person. I hear people say, I brought, 526 people to Christ in the last quarter. You know what I mean? I'm like, what? I've gotten messages and stuff like that, but I don't have that kind of power. I just share my story. I've said the name Jesus more on this show than I ever have. When I do say it, just comes out like I would say Aaron, because I want to show it, and I truly believe what I just stated with all my heart. Okay.
I know you do. I can feel it right now. But so if you believe that, then what do you believe is going to happen to the Buddhist when he dies? A man who sat in prayer, in meditation to God his whole life, but he's not Christian. He doesn't accept Jesus as his savior.
He or she is not going to experience heaven. I truly believe that. But that comes.
Isn't that unfair though? Like if he was never even exposed to it, some people never even get exposed to Christianity.
Well, the Bible says that, the rapture won't occur until everyone has had a shot at the gospel. Okay. And so, because that wouldn't be a loving God.
Right. Because that wouldn't be fair.
That wouldn't line up with the word, so it wouldn't add up. So everybody's going to get a shot at it.
So that guy, if he never had exposure
he will get exposure.
So he comes back again. So you how does he get exposure? If he died before the exposure occurred?
When they die, they've had exposure. Some way or some form or fashion, they've had that exposure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and hey, look, I sound like I'm judging you right now. I'm
No,
not.
listen.
Not.
Let me stop you. No, you're not.
Okay.
No, you're not. I mean, you're just asking questions.
Yeah. These are things I struggle with in my own mind growing up Catholic, you know.
This is a great conversation. This is a healthy conversation to have because there's a lot of conversations that I see that it makes me tense. It's like, golly, you're putting such a bad example of Christianity out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's scary. There's this movement out there called the prosperity gospel. You know, you give the church money and he'll give you money. Listen, God doesn't need me. I need him, you know? But this is healthy conversation.
What about the people before Jesus came back? Nobody even had the opportunity for exposure.
Before he comes back?
Before Jesus came to earth, the people who lived before that never had a chance for exposure.
Okay, so this is another show. I mean, it's deeper. Once again, I am really studying more theological. So when we die, we're dead. I mean, we're there. Our soul leaves, okay?
Right.
And when the rapture happens, heaven opens up. You know, that's when it all happens. I may get that a little wrong, but the I'm learning. Great questions. I had that question too in the Old Testament days.
Yeah,
but they're there. And then you can get into angels. I mean, you have an angel. You're assigned an angel. And, you know, you say a prayer and that prayer is, you know, up there, you know, to do that. And what it is you have to understand that's controlling. But I had to understand. I understand what a personal relationship is with Christ. Okay. It's not, there's a lot of people's Jesus I don't want. I don't want their Jesus, you know, but mine is a personal relationship. Just like if do you have kids?
Yeah. Okay.
So you treat each kid differently because you see in their thresholds. Okay. You can overcoach this one and he'll take it. And you can, if you did the same coaching to that one, they wouldn't take it, right? You'd lose them, right? So as you learn how to coach them because of their thresholds, you have a personal relationship with each one of your kids.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting a little bit schematical here and everything.
You're a thinker, and I was that too.
Yeah.
And what happens is that spirit, mind, and body, that when I'm operating off the spirit, then it controls my mind, which expresses in the body, right? If that's out of order, I'm thinking too much. I'm being too analytical. I'm trying to be more educated, right? And that's what the enemy wants me to do, is to overthink it.
Yeah. You got to open the heart space up, the intuitive space.
You're very, very bright. You're very smart. And I see searching. Searching is, you know, you're searching, you know, I need something that makes sense to me, you know, that makes sense. You know, I had a bright light, burning bush moment, you know, and, you know, my whole life I had burning bush moments, but I was setting the bush on fire, right? But it's a, you know, I started reading a book that I would never read, you know, and it started making sense to me as a result of reading a book written by Dr. Tony Evans. That's what got me into it. I said, you know what? I can relate to what Dr. Evans is saying. And there was like a scripture word, and then I would go to that and read it. And it was the New Living Translation. You know, it's funny. The more smart we think we're becoming in the world, the easier translations God puts on the bookshelves. You know, you got King James all the way down to New Living Translation, which is so easy for me to read, right? And so I was like, oh, wow, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense. But it was for me. You know, I wasn't like, oh, my God, you know, Aaron, this makes sense to me. This is what you have to do. No.
Yeah, no, and I like that about you because, you do meet some people in different religions that it's their way.
But it's cool when I get messages saying, hey, man, I accepted Christ because of hearing your story. And I'm like going, wow, you know, and I don't share that stuff. You know, I mean, it's like, you know, hey, there's a guy that no, that turns me off.
Yeah.
You know,
me too.
Yeah.
Wow. What a cool,
be open-minded.
Oh, I am.
And you are open-minded.
Oh, 100%.
And I look forward to our friendship for future that you call me and say, hey, I want to run this by you.
Yeah.
And if I don't know, I don't know.
And now I'll end it with this particular part of this. I don't know either.
Yeah.
I mean,
but I believe.
Exactly.
I believe.
I do have a pretty solid belief, but ultimately anyone who tells me, when I hear somebody that says, I know, especially when you're talking about this kind of stuff, I'm just like, okay, I'm barely listening. How could you know? You're still a human being. You're not dead.
Yeah. And then they get into topics on sin, and they really don't, I understand what the word sin. I used to hear sin all the time and that I'm bad and all that. No, I mean, but like, is homosexuality a sin? Is this a sin? They go right to that topic there. You know what I mean? Right. Heck, my thoughts are sin, and what it is that it's when I put God on a shelf and it's relapse, it's spiritual relapse is when I put God on the shelf and I do it. What happens is it separates me from God. And now I got this gap, and in that gap is consequences, right? But the sooner that I repent, church word, okay, get honest, accept my role, turn away from, that gap closes up. And so that's a whole other topic.
Well, I think a relationship with the universe is experiential.
Yeah.
It's not words.
Yeah.
It's not, teasing out everything and being like a scientist. And if I were to understand this information better than somebody else, I am more connected to God. I am more connected to the universe. I mean, that's great if that's your hobby and you want to spend a lot of time teasing all that stuff out and learning it. It's really great, actually.
But me personally, I know who made the stars.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'm more like you too. I'm more like it's experiential.
Yeah.
And I've seen and felt things that I believe are real.
Yeah. But the more I studied about this story, this great story, the more I studied about it, and YouTube, and you got to be real careful on YouTube as far as, people, call the gospel, which is the truth, is that the more and more I studied, the more and more it made sense to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. And how God created things. He created Adam first. It was about positioning, not priority. It all makes sense. And it's really opened my eyes. And so I study it really hard on how to deliver that to platforms where it's not Christianese. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because once again, like I started, my passion is to not to influence others or to be popular, but it's to share my personal experience, how I look at life through God's perspective and not the world's.
Well, based on results, which is how I like to judge a situation, it's working.
Yeah.
I mean, you are here because of these awakenings. You are here because of this belief.
Yeah.
And I think you know this, but I can barely know you, and I can tell if you hadn't found that and had that awakening and done this work and connected to God in that way. I don't know if you'd be sitting here with me today.
No.
So based on results, and I see that time and time again in the Christian community, and that's why people think sometimes it's like, oh, Aaron probably doesn't like the Christian community because he's so Buddhist, and I'm like, oh, I don't, at all.
I didn't take that at all.
I don't, but I guess I've had others say that, and I'm like, not at all, dude. Are you kidding me?
No.
What do you guys do on the weekends? Oh, we all go to a place on Sunday and we are nice to each other and we talk about the great creator, the universe, why we're here. And then we go have food, and we do that once a week. I'm like, sounds like a pretty fucking cool program. I mean, everybody else that isn't doing that, what are you doing on Sunday? You know? So I'm in love with all religions. I really am. I think there's just people that for whatever reason are wired to be a part of different ones. If you're born in India, maybe you're a Hindu, and if you were born in China, maybe you're a Taoist.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the great creator just placed these different roads. Right. And you're from Texas. If you're going to pick a spiritual path, it's going to be Christianity.
For me, it was the last shop on the block. My story, you know what I mean? Right. I didn't grow up in a church home. The challenging ones.
Isn't there more churches in Texas than there is like grocery stores? I've heard that.
Yeah, it's probably right. But I don't have religious trauma.
Right.
There's a lot of people, that grow up in the church and with the biblical and all that stuff, and they have so much religious trauma. What I mean?
Have to unwind all that to get back to the source. Yeah,
it's living life by rules. And it's living life by oh my God, I'm thinking this way. Oh my God, and what a prison. And I that's one thing I didn't have. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, you didn't have to like back out of that. You got to come into it raw and new.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, buddy, what are you doing nowadays with all this energy, with all this love, with all this compassion, with all this need and calling to be of service to others? What are you doing? What are you doing with your time?
I'm doing this. Yeah. I'm just paying it forward. Sharing my experience, strength, and hope, and what's working for me today, and being, and being completely transparent and honest, and sharing stories of just simple things that everybody can relate to. how I process fear. And, today, if I get a splinter in my pinky toe, I don't cut both my legs off to get remove the splinter. You know what I mean? But, I travel, I tour, I speak, I do TV, I appear on, news and all that stuff. And they bring me on as, addiction expert or whatever like that, which is real refreshing because you hear a lot about at the national level, the opioid crisis and the fentanyl and all that. And, you hear all the stats and the political and all that stuff. But what I love about it is I bring solutions, like the wall, I said, you can build a wall around the whole country. I'm still going to get high. You know what I mean? The real problem in this situation like that is the addict. Yeah. Okay. The addict is the solution. And how do we help them? It's one recovering addict working with another. Yeah. If you want to experience church, go to a 12-step recovery group meeting. We attend those every day. Church is on Sunday. If you want to experience church, I mean, that's where you can really experience there.
I will do that. Yeah. I've always been curious. I've had so many friends who've gone through 12-step that I just seen the results of their life and how much better they're doing. And it's obviously some good work happening in there. So,
we've just launched a nonprofit called M2 The Rock Services. And we are providing services for people in need. That can't afford it. It's groundbreaking. So we're putting it together, but resources like, Lee McGuire, who's the president of M2 The Rock Services, and came up with a great concept of like at the I Am Second film, it's very touching, moving 9-minute film. It's got millions and millions of views. And I love that because people are seeing it, but when you watch it and it's over, it's like, okay, now what? Where can I get help? And so we're providing resources from financial to psychiatry to mental health. Mental health is real. All the things to fitness to everything. Online counselors to provide that high level of care for people who can't afford it. So we're working on that right now. And then as a result of just delivering the message.
That's cool.
Yeah. And working on a book.
Okay. Very cool.
Eventually hoping, it's kind of, that's what I'm here for. I was in LA a couple of days ago, but a book.
About your life?
My story. Yeah. And it's a lot to share in there. We've got an incredible person. We're going to go public here in about a week or two, announcing it, but an incredible writer, screenplay writer that they want to do a movie on it. And we got a family in Dallas that's very, very passionate about it. So never would I thunk this sitting in prison. And once again, it's never my plan. I just want to serve God every day. That's it.
Being of service to others. That's how I would have worded it. But I do understand that when you occupy your mind with that, most of the time, that's a good place to be. Yeah.
And the great thing about doing stuff like this is that I was never thinking about the future while we're in this interview, and I was never thinking about the past. And it puts me right here, right now, because I'm serving, you're serving, and the safest place in the world is right here, right now. And the reason why is because that's where God's at.
Yeah.
The enemy.
See my watch? It says now.
There you go.
Because that's the time. Yeah. That's the right time.
Yeah. Because this disease, the enemy, Satan, it wants me to go in the future alone in my head.
Yeah.
And in the past alone in my head.
What might happen? What did happen? Yeah. Spend a little too much time in those places.
Everybody can relate to that.
Oh, God.
And so then we seek for visible things to make that go away. And that's addiction. So everybody's an addict.
Yep. Yeah, I'm guilty. Yeah, I can think of many times where I was just, I have a lot of anxiety. What would make me feel better? I don't know. Let's go buy some cool shit.
You know what the solution is to anxiety?
What is it?
Serve someone.
Yeah. No, I do know.
That's how I learned it. Yeah. My anxiety in prison, that's where the awakening was. The anxiety went away when I opened a book that I didn't want. It has a horrible cover. It's a boring cover. And I opened a book and read to Uwe. The anxiety went away.
You hear that, everybody? I think this is a good ending point to what we've done here today. If you're feeling that anxiety, it seems like the anxiety, meet someone today who doesn't have anxiety. It just seems to be an over-encompassing vibe of culture everywhere, me included. Wake up and ask yourself, who could I help out today?
Just text 3 people.
Yeah. I've done this too. And it's crazy how much better you feel. And you're just like, oh God, that actually made me actually feel better versus going to a nice restaurant and eating decadent food or buying myself a new cool pair of shoes or, that stuff makes you feel better for about, it's got this little shelf life to it. But
visible things.
Yeah.
Right. But text 3 people and say, hey, I was just thinking about you. Have a good day, and expect nothing in return.
Yeah, that's so true. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love meeting you. I love that.
Me too.
That Brandy brought us
too.
together. It's kind of cool because I don't know exactly, but your show will be coming out in about a month. You will have already released some of your new things you're doing.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to tell more people about it, connect more people to it.
And we have our show too. And I want you to be on our show. So this is a formal invite to be on our show and Zoom me in and all that stuff.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Yeah. And your team, what a great team you have here. The sound, the light, everything. I mean, I applaud.
You guys can't see her over there.
This is like
that's my little angel in the corner over there.
First class.
She's amazing. Thank you, Michelle. Awesome, buddy. Well, give me a hand.
Yeah.
We'll hug afterwards.
All right. Yeah.
Thank you again for coming
on.
You. Thank you for sharing your story, being willing to tell those stories, especially the nitty-gritty details. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of love and not a lot of fear. Not many people got that going on enough to do that. So, and you already know this, but I can feel it coming out of you. Your voice, your story, the way you are, what you represent is going to help has already, and it's going to continue to help so many people. I'm proud to just be a small part of that.
Oh, you're a huge part of it.
Well,
yeah. You're helping spread the message.
Yeah. That's what it's about.
All
right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I'd like to thank my sponsors, Solon. Ooh, look at me. I'm wearing a Solon t-shirt today. Ryan and Jeremy over there at Solon, great sponsor for the show, helps keep us going. Another fantastic business owners that give a shit about the community, that give back to tattoo artists, to their own personal communities, that know what it means to be of service. One of the reasons I like them, have them as a sponsor, because they represent the same energy frequency I believe in. So thank you, Solon. And also thank you, my fans, the ones that keep watching this show, the messages. Keep sending me messages, you guys. When it gets quiet out there, I start doubting myself. So, all it takes is one DM from one person to say, bro, that episode really lit me up, made me feel good, helped me out, anything. And then, boom, I'm down to do 100 more after I read that message. So thank you for the messages. Thank you for the shares. I'll keep them coming. That's it for today. Until the next one, fuck it.